There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Read. I'm sitting in my reading and sleeping chair in the living room where I always comment that I don't have the actual electrical recliner up. I'm sitting straight up, supposedly, in this chair, but just leaning back like this. It's also a rocker. I feel too relaxed, so it's not the ideal place to film. I think I can keep myself awake. I have lots of interesting things to tell you. Nothing particularly personal. The only personal news is that I'm all alone. I'm orphaned for the next 2 months. My parents, who live a 10-minute drive, 5-minute drive away from me, they spend the winter on Vancouver Island in Victoria, and they left last Saturday. It just made me realize that I rarely leave the house unless they're picking me up to take me somewhere, over to their house, or to take me grocery shopping, or to go out for lunch or something. But otherwise I pretty much stay home. So I've forced myself to go out a few times this week, and there were no calamities. I went to the branch library down the street maybe Tuesday to return some books and do some reading, and then I spent about a half day at the university library yesterday, which was fabulous. I think I'm going to do a university library book haul. Stay tuned for that. That's pretty much it. Here is the week in review. I have been honored by my friend Mikiko, who's joining us today from a dark room in Ireland. Hello, Mikiko.
Hi, Sean.
Tell the viewers, this is not a bite-sized book chat. This is going to be quite a long-form chat. Tell them how you're honoring me.
I am honoring you.
Well, this is a very special treat to have Roz of Scallydandling About the Books on my channel for a bite-sized book chat. Hello, Roz.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Wow, that's quite a beautiful purple glove you've got there. All right, here is the big reveal for book game number 9. These were not only all memoirs or autobiographies, they were all memoirs or autobiographies by queer men. The widow of an English doctor who had been a great character on our shore, though he never doctored any of us because we, of course, were united. I had heard of Mr. Laidlaw before, because I had known people who had come to him for tutoring in Latin in high school. He had given Greek lessons, too, to Asher Bowen, whose parents lived farther up, on the riverside of the road, in the big white house obscured by a wood planted with daffodils. Old Mr. Laidlaw knew his poetry, knew his verse, distinguished between the two, and disapproved of W. H. Auden, but had met Brigid, and was superb on T. S. Eliot. Before I tell you how many books I finished and started, let me just say that my new improved attitude towards Friday Reads really helped me this week. I did finish some books, but I also didn't put pressure on me to, finish more. There's lots of things to talk about on a Friday Reads other than, it's not like a deadline by which I have to have a certain amount of books read. That was very liberating. I think most of you understood. I hope that I was not attributing the pressure to my subscribers, but that it's a pressure that I and all other booktubers, I'm pretty sure, put on themselves. So most others. I'm feeling relatively free of that particular neurosis. I'm sure another one will come up and fill that empty space. So I did finish 3 books. I have still no bales. What's up with that? And I started 2 books. The first book that I finished, I've already taken back to the library because it was due and it was an interlibrary loan. Hence my visit to the branch library on Tuesday, or maybe Monday. And that was the non-fiction book, 100 Saturdays, Stella, Levi, and the Search for a Lost World by Michael Frank. This book didn't quite work for me, but I'm glad I read it. It didn't completely hold my interest, and I think that was the fault of the writer, or it didn't match my reading tastes, but I still really got a lot out of it. Stella Levi was, I think, 92 when this writer named Michael Frank started coming over to her apartment in Brooklyn, or certainly New York City, Saturday afternoons, and her telling him her life story. She grew up on the island of Rhodes, which, let me get this straight because I tend to screw it up every time I try and tell it, was originally a Turkish island, and then it was conquered by the Italians, No, I've still got it wrong. The history of Rhodes is too complicated, and especially since I started thinking it was somewhere in Rhodesia before I started reading the book. It is a Greek island, okay? It is a Greek island. The 9th largest island in the Mediterranean. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes, is there. It was seized by the Italians in 1912 from the Ottomans, who had it up till then. Lots of Italian colonists came in. Then it was taken over by Germany when Italy, after Mussolini was killed. That part, yeah, it's really a dense history. It's really complicated, but I think I've got the bare bones facts straight. Stella Levi grew up in the Jewish enclave, the Jewish ghetto on Rhodes. It was called Juderia, and it was such an insular culture. The Jewish people who lived there, their ancestors had been there for centuries, if not millennia, and so it was extremely insular. When Stella Levi was a child, which we're talking, she's about 98 now, apparently still alive. So in the 1920s or whatever, it was 50 to 100 years behind the rest of Europe in terms of like technology and indoor plumbing, and just it was a very, very insular culture with a lot of fascinating spirituality. And she didn't come from a particularly observant family of Jews, but fascinating cultural stuff and superstitions and all this stuff. And her memories of her childhood and with an extended family, it's really colorful, really interesting, perhaps a little bit too much detail for me, but quite enjoyable. And then, sadly, with the handover to the Germans in about 1943, something like that, the Jews were rounded up and sent to Auschwitz. I think she was only there, but by the time Auschwitz was liberated, about a year and a bit. But it was, of course, terrible, and she lived to tell the tale, and she now is 98, and she hadn't really told the full story of her life, including what happened at Auschwitz and all that stuff, before she told it to this writer. It didn't grab me viscerally the way other books about the Holocaust or about Jewish history. I don't know if I've ever read a work of Jewish history or biography aside from Holocaust literature, but it didn't grab hold of me, and I think it was the way he told the story. Michael Frank put himself into the story too much, and he was always breaking the story as Stella was telling it. Like he would write it in expository prose. It was never in first person, but unless it was a direct quote. But he would tell the story, and then he would bring the narrative back to her living room in Brooklyn and him asking her a question, and then how did she answer it, or did she evade? Was her answer evasive, or did she have a long pause? And there was something about that was inartful and kept pulling me out of the story. If he had left himself out and just written the story, he was quite a fine writer, but that thing going back and forth was disruptive for me. Particularly, I started to get annoyed that not every time he would jump back to the present, him and sitting in Stella Levi's living room in the a year ago or 3 years ago during these 100 Saturdays, that he often characterized those incidents as him asking probing questions, as him making suggestions to her that she would maybe reject and then come back a month later and say, well, maybe that was right. And I didn't like that. Like, don't put yourself in the story in a kind of way that grandiosizes yourself. No, don't do that. I didn't like that. So I didn't love it, but I'm glad I read it. So that was a 4-star read, and this was also a 4-star read, just by looking at him, by Ryan O'Connell. This was a buddy read with Joe Smith, and I really liked it. I think that I actually loved it until the ending. The ending was just a bit too pat, preachy, and sentimental for me. But it brought it down from a 5-star read to a 4-star read. What a talented writer. And this was a very autobiographical story about a young gay man who has cerebral palsy. And he is in a relationship of several years with a non-disabled partner with a huge dick. That's how the story opens. And he's getting restless after, I think, 6 years. And he has a high-paying job as a writer for a TV show and
doesn't feel like he's respected at work, and he's always complaining about that. He's a little bit whiny, but I loved everything about him, really. The audiobook was narrated expertly by Ryan O'Connell himself, who has the most fabulously gay voice and intonation, and makes the story come alive in a way that I don't know what it would be like just reading it, because Ryan O'Connell's audio narration just adds so much gayness to this story. And it was funny, with lots of poignant, more serious dimensions to the story. It really opened my eyes to being disabled as a gay man, that I thought was really well done. And then the rest of the story about gay culture and relationships and sex was so relatable. I think you need to listen to maybe even a little bit more than the 5-minute preview of the audiobook to see whether you want to spend that much time with this personality. I loved that personality. I loved him, but it maybe not everyone's cup of tea. You might actually get along better reading the book without that voice in your ear, but I just thought it was perfect. The ending was just, like I say, at the risk of repeating myself, it was too pat. Everything was tied up in a bow, and I felt it was a little bit preachy. But it's also the kind of book that would be incredibly healing for probably especially a gay man struggling with sexual compulsion, addiction, and low self-esteem, and all that stuff that so many gay men have struggled with. And that if it hits you at the right time, it could change your life. It was a little too preachy for me, but I would still recommend it, because right up until about the last couple chapters, I was just loving it. I'm certainly going to follow him. He's got a thing on Netflix. It's like a serial. I don't know. It's called Special. I think it's based on his memoir called I'm Special. He is somebody to watch. Incredibly talented. With that caution that might be just subjective to me, may not be a problem for you, I recommend this very, very highly. And saving the best for last, I'm pulling a Lindy here, but I didn't plan it that way. I'm just talking about my books in the order in which I finished them. Lindy loves to save her favorite read of the week or of the last 3 days to talk about last, which I think is a great idea too, but this is just coincidental. I just this morning finished The Stromness Dinner by Peter Benson. Oh my God, I love this book so much. I started it, goodness. When did I start it? Last year for sure. So it's a carryover from 2022. It was on my most anticipated new releases for 2022. So I pre-ordered it. No, for 2021. So yeah, that's why Shehan, the book maniac, shouldn't get himself so worked up about new releases, because no, I pre-ordered this and it's a 2020 publication. So in my most anticipated video for 2020, I said, I pre-ordered this, I can't wait for it to come out, and I don't even really remember what I heard about it to make me pre-order it, but I finally read it, starting at the end of 2022 and carrying into February of 2023, and it was worth the wait. I'm going to do a full review of this because I feel really passionate about it. So what I'll say here is, first of all, there's no queer content, which is, I think I got a whiff that there was, but there wasn't. There might have been some homoerotic energy. Certainly, I was very attracted to the straight male protagonist. He was hot and sweet. I just fell in love with this character. This is an extremely character-driven novel. There is plot, but you could almost bat it away, because really you're just spending time with Ed, this home renovator guy. He's a builder, as they say in the UK, he's a builder. And, you know, he has adventures, and he's just got this really quirky, sensitive perceptivity about his environment. And he is not well educated. He is not a sophisticated person. And so he uses simple language to describe everything around him and creates these word pictures about food. He's a real foodie, and that's an important part of this book. This is not a book to read when you're on a diet, about people, about birds, about anything. And oh, I just loved spending time in his head. And I think that's all I'm going to say. Who the hell is Peter Benson, and where has he been all my life? He's had another novel come out since this, with a very similarly attractive cover with red, also from Sarin Books, and a considerable backlist So this is a marvelous discovery. However, belatedly, after I got all excited in late 2019 about this forthcoming release that I pre-ordered, I finally read it, and yes, I will be evangelizing about this novel, The Stromness Dinner by Peter Benson, from here on in. Stay tuned for my review. So that's what I finished. I've started 2. I have got a very, very bare start on this mammoth biography of Ronald Firbank, Brigid Brophy's Prancing novelist. And the first chapter, Curtis warned me, is a literary theory, or certainly from the perspective of a writer who cares about literature. It's literary theory, and I enjoy reading literary theory, even though I think it's probably mostly nonsense. It's incredibly well written here. It's dense, densely written, but beautifully written. And what happens for me when I read anything to do with theory, don't get me started on philosophy, which there is no redeeming value to philosophy. That's another video topic. But literary theory, I can see the application of it, but I've already forgotten everything I've read in the first 12 pages of this, because I don't retain theoretical stuff. So to me, in my universe, that means it's not important, but I'm enjoying reading it, even if I couldn't tell you anything about what I read, other than that she was not a fan of the naturalist school of 19th century literature. But yeah, keep going with it. The first chapter is about literature. The second chapter is about Firbank's life, so I will do better with the second chapter. And I'm not going to bail before I get there. Might skim. No, actually, I'm not going to skim either. But Curtis and I are going to be talking about this in mid-March, so I better plug away. This is a success story so far. This is the novel from Cameroon, Léonora Miano's Twilight of Torment, Volume 1, Melancholy, translated from the French by Gila Walker. This is a buddy read with Roz. If you're wondering where Roz is, check out my most recently posted episode of Bite Size Book Chats, where she explains all that stuff. So I've read the first long chapter, 70 pages of this, and it is fascinating. It couldn't be more different from the other novel by Miano that I read, that both Roz and I read a year or two ago. It was a historical novel set during the era of the slave trade in Africa. This one is set in basically modern day, and it is a story of a Cameroonian man told from the point of view of 4 important women in his life. So the chapter or section that Roz and I read in the past week was from the perspective of his mother. And that is told in the second person, which I really dislike. The only way I can deal with the second person point of view is I just convert it sentence by sentence into I, if you becomes I, because I just think it's a stupid tense, and I know there's a lot of people out there that it has some kind of redeeming literary value. Convince me. And the first 10 or so pages are really abstract, and I don't know anything about this woman. What is she going on about? Quite disorienting and off-putting. And I thought, oh my God, am I going to bail on this? But by about page 11 or 12, she starts talking about people. And so I start to get a sense of who the characters are. And then I was hooked. It's a challenging read. It's got a lot of people in it. And we never hear from the man who is, in some ways, the main character. But we're going to hear 4 different perspectives. This is his mother. I think the next chapter is his first wife. And then maybe his second girlfriend or whatever. And then his sister. Those 4. It's going to be fascinating to see what kind of a portrait Léonora Miano builds of this man. And certainly themes of colonialism and post-colonialism are woven through the story in a really interesting way. I wouldn't say that it's grabbed me by the gut yet, but it's really holding my interest, and that's all I'll say for now. But it's certainly a physically beautiful book, and no, I think I've only found one typo, which one typo every 70 pages is not a big deal. I think you heard me complaining about the last Seagull book I read that was full of them. This one is not. So those are what I've started, and I'm not going to tell you how many books I'm reading. I'm probably not going to tell you that anymore, because it ends up creating this pressure on myself. It's still about where it was for the entire month of January. It's not getting above that, but I'm having trouble getting it down to where I set it. I'm just going to be vague for a while about that, because I'm planning to start 4 and possibly 5 books. Let me tell you about the 5th one, because I don't have it, so I'm liable to forget. That is, I believe it's the debut novel, certainly an early novel, by Daša Drndić, Battle Songs, translated maybe from the Croatian, I'm not sure. Sorry, Amelia, I don't know. There's so many languages where she grew up, I'm not sure which one she wrote in. But anyway, I think it's Croatian, by Celia Hawksworth. And this will be a pseudo-buddy read with Dan of the Weird Book Club. So when I say pseudo-buddy read, I mean that we're not doing check-ins after every 5 chapters or anything. We're not checking in at all. We're just going to hook up on Zoom after we both read it and chat. I don't have it yet because it's just being released. I ordered it. The bookseller that could get it to me the fastest was Chapters Indigo, which is Canada's Barnes & Noble, basically. A bookstore chain that people love to hate, and I kind of hate it too. But their customer service is, this was the 3rd book that I've either special ordered or something from them in the last few months, and they're never late. If they say it's going to be ready for me to pick up at the store, or they'll mail it to me by such and such a date. 3 times they've been exactly on that date. So they were the ones that I could get it from the earliest. It's supposed to be delivered Monday. However, their website was hacked a couple days ago. It's fairly major news across Canada, and it's still down. So I'm a little bit worried that that's going to wreak havoc with the delivery or whatever, but maybe not. We'll see. If it arrives, I'll be starting it next week. If it doesn't arrive, then I will get farther into the other 4 books I'm planning to start. So a belated start on Black History Month with this one. I told you about it last week, The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzette Mayr. I don't have to tell you about it. Everybody's been reading it. Finally, I'm going to get to it. I have 2 Just Because books. This is quite a new release from Western Canada, but it was published in America and Canada the same day, and my friend Bernie of Bernie Lombardi is already reading it. The American edition, and I ordered the American edition because I love the covers so much, better than the Canadian. Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. Jessica Johns is a member of the Sucker Creek First Nation in Treaty 8 territory, which is now, we call Alberta, Northern Alberta. And I think this is her debut novel, and it's a horror novel, or it has horror elements. We'll see, but it sounds really intriguing. The main character wakes up with a crow's head in her hands, and the story goes from there. But isn't that a gorgeous cover? The Canadian one's really ugly. Why am I surprised? And this one just came in the mail the other day. This was one of my most anticipated for 2023, and I figure don't let all your most anticipated reads carry over for 2 years before you read them. This one's short. I'm going to read it and perhaps even review it before you see me next Friday. This is a gay novel from Brazil. The Words That Remain by Stênio Gardel. Translated from the Portuguese by Bruna Dantas Lobate. The main character received a love letter decades ago from another man. A lot of time has gone by. He's still haunted by this secret letter. Plot ensues. Yeah, I'm planning to have this read. I never read a book in a week, even when it's only 140 pages, but this I'm going to do it. And if I like it well enough, maybe I will be first and publish the first English language booktube review. There's all kinds of Portuguese language reviews of it, but none in English yet. And finally, now that Joe and I have finished that really gay novel, just by looking at him, we are going to start another gay novel, and this one is very, very literary. It actually won a major book prize last year, The Booker. The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida. I don't know how gay it is. I know that the main character is gay. That's all I know. Pretty popular book. I think I've seen mixed reviews. Eric Carl Anderson loved it. I'm excited to finally get to it. All right, that's what I got. Thanks for watching.